Welcome to the recap of Module 6 of the MOOC Managing Building Adaptation. In this video we're going to discuss some personal lessons you came up with and some personal building adaptation proposals. We were really delighted to see the ideas that you brought forward in these assignments. And we'll discuss some of your personal lessons first. Kasia Oegman was inspired by the green ideas of the BK City project. Not only because they create a more environmental friendly building and environment, but also for its social cultural aspects. It increases the comfort and well-being of occupants and making a building more livable. This user perspective is a very refreshing idea, she thought. Marissa Yamaguchi was inspired by bamboo as sustainable construction material. She considered this from an economic aspect. As bamboo is renewable and a fast-growing material, it makes the cultivation of it very economically viable. However, in Brazil, it would be necessary to develop regulations and do research to determine the strength of the material for construction. Alex Tong was inspired by the adaptive reuse concept of Isabao, who created a positive residual value with small affordable housing units. This idea could also be very interesting for buildings in Hong Kong, Alex says, where most people can only afford to rent small units. However, he thinks that there are many barriers for creating smaller housing units in Hong Kong, like a stigma on living in social housing, the higher financial returns for developers when they develop large apartments, and the lack of government subsidies. These examples clearly show that contextual differences between countries exist, but that you can still draw inspirational lessons from one place to the other. Now let's move on to the transplantation lessons, and we discuss some of the tools that you think are transplantable to other contexts. Alejandro Pineda says the stakeholder analysis tool could be used everywhere. He proposes that municipal subsidies and EU labels would help incentivize actors to adapt buildings. And a multi-year action plan could also be introduced to people to raise the awareness about the medium and long-term cost savings by implementing sustainability measures in homes. Mauricio Papa argues that the conversion meter could be implemented in Italy as well, as housing prices in the bigger cities are similar in terms of prices per square meter as in the Netherlands. This is a key factor in determining how successful a conversion into housing could be, Mauricio states. But notice that housing prices often differ between cities, so also between countries. Margarita Morales Cortes says the conversion meter could also be used in Chile. But she states that it still needs to be adapted to the zoning regulations and building construction code of Chile, and the specific city plan in which a building stands. We couldn't agree more. These examples exactly illustrate what we mean by using and transplanting tools from one place to another. This applies to all the tools that we have introduced in this course. The principle of these tools will be adaptable in any context, but the parameters need to change and be adapted to the local context.
Thank you for all the uploads for assignment 6.2. We would first like to start with a general remark. We got a lot of proposals that included a green facade. We think this is a great idea to make our buildings more sustainable. However, we do have some side notes on this related to management. Green facades come at much higher costs for developers, and they will need to offset those costs to home owners or real estate investors, who do not necessarily see the financial benefits of such a measure. Also, the costs for maintenance for green facades is much higher than for a normal facade. The costs for these facades are usually initially made by real estate developers, and they will need to offset these costs to real estate investors or homeowners who are not always willing to pay for such measures. The same situation occurs for solar panels. But for solar panels it's different, because nowadays in Western countries they are usually obligatory to meet the energy performance requirements. We would like to shortly elaborate on a few of the submissions we received for this assignment. This is an example from Jan Ruitenberg. He performed a lot of different analyses and he gave a good overview of the building. We think this is an interesting building choice. It's nice to see how he applies the tools to a building typology we have not elaborated much on during the course. He also links the outcomes of different tools to each other to make a complete adaptation plan. Maybe due to the size of the building, looking into mixed use could be an idea to make it future-proof. This proposal from Kasia Oegman shows a great drawing that visualizes the new use very well. And it definitely does make the building look more attractive. The proposal was very clear on the measures to be taken to make the building more sustainable and fit for new use. However, we do wonder about the retail use of the plinth in this area. We think you need to actually perform the analysis that are mentioned to propose such a use. Michael Burghardt has a smart building and location choice in an area that's redeveloping quickly, so there's a lot of potential for adaptation. He has good ideas for updating the entire plot, not just the building. Also, a lot of research has been done to support the idea. To suggest further exploration, we think it would be interesting to think about the internal organization and to think about how to update the facade, since you proposed luxury apartments. If you do so, you need to make the building look more attractive to attract potential buyers. We would like to close off with Maurizio Papa. He has the most complete adaptation proposal we have received. He chose the tools to make a complete proposal very carefully. There is a great contextual analysis, and he performed very good functional, market and policy analysis to decide on the type of adaptation. This resulted in a very clear proposal for the interior layout of the building, the choice of apartments, and even a network diagram was added that is needed to clarify the entire process. All in all, we think you understood very well what is needed from a management perspective to make an adaptation initiative to a success. You all have great ideas for your buildings, a lot of them which are very interesting, but we missed a proper application of the tools sometimes. A proper application is necessary to make your adaptation realizable. To show us what you have learned from this MOOC, we would like to see more of these tools applied. Thank you very much for taking this journey with us. We really enjoyed the first run of the Managing Building Adaptation MOOC. We really hope to see you again in our next MOOC.